Hey guys, welcome back to Horse Teeth Cinema. Today I'm going to be reviewing The Last Sunday of High School. This film was directed by Nigel and Stuart Butler. So this review is a follow-up to the interview I just did with the filmmaker Nigel Butler, which was the first one on my channel. I was really happy to do it. And I also reviewed their film, Nigel and Stewart's film last year, Buried on Shine Mountain, which is a Western that I actually ended up really enjoying. And they were kind enough to send me another screener. So this film, The Last Sunday of High School, is about four friends who, the day after graduation, reunite for one last hangout, revisiting old memories, ending an era, and looking into the unknown. So once again, as a disclaimer, Nigel Butler, one of the filmmakers, did reach out to me for this on this film with a screener link. And I took him up on the offer because, for one, I understand how hard it is to get a independent film noticed by an audience, and also because it helps my channel, right? Like, he might have an audience who has seen his movies before. They come to my channel and kind of grows the conversation that way. So just figured I should put that disclaimer out there up front. So after interviewing Nigel, I really enjoyed hearing about his filmmaking process, and one thing that really stuck out to me about him as a creative is that he's really interested in creating memorable, kind of specific, well-defined characters. So it only makes sense that he and Stewart would make a coming-of-age dramedy like this, where the main experience of watching the film is sort of hanging out with the characters and getting to know them on a deeper level. I have to say, I didn't love this movie. I found it a pretty mixed bag, and I think I recognized a lot of very clear strengths in their filmmaking, and there's things that I enjoyed that I'll get into. But ultimately, there were also kind of some limitations to the production that I do think limited my experience overall. I'll start with what I did like, and one thing I really loved was the angle this film took on the coming of age narrative. It's about a set of characters who are, at once they're chronologically on kind of the same inflection point of their lives. So they're graduating high school and they're entering the workforce, but they're doing that in very different ways, and the ways in which they talk about how their lives are about to change affects the relationship and sort of imposes a little bit of doubt as to what comes next for them. It's something I definitely can relate to. I mean, looking back and for the end of high school for me, I had a couple of really tightly knit friend groups, and a lot of us went to college in like many in places that were many different time zones away from each other. Some of us pursued work rather than college right out of high school, which put us at different kind of points in our lives in terms of our challenges, our hopes. There's a character throughout the film who is very clearly trying to hold on to the way things used to be with his high school friends, and then there's other characters who seem very excited about their prospects and very kind of anxious for change. I found the characters in this film really distinct, and it's fun to go along the journey of seeing how this conflict sort of bubbles to the surface. There's a great sort of really humorous bit towards the end of the film that I won't spoil. And you're also kind of left wondering at the end of the film, about where these characters' lives go afterwards. And I think that's really important. It is important for the audience to sort of, care enough to at least have those questions. There are also some pretty clever visual touches throughout the film. There's one shot in particular where the characters are all talking about something, and they're looking at the thing that they're talking about, but instead of filmed from their point of view or sort of like an objective point of view, the camera actually takes the point of view of the thing that they're looking at. And the way that scene is capped off is not only pretty visually inventive, but also pretty funny. A lot of the film also takes place around a campfire in their backyard, and what they do with like the way that they frame the campfire is pretty interesting, especially in regards to the editing. And it adds some visual flair to what's otherwise a pretty simple premise of just these four friends catching up and hanging out. That said, I did struggle with this film quite a bit. I think there's quite a few aspects of the production where you can really feel the limitations as a viewer. Some of it's the look of the film, which, it is shot on relatively cheap digital cameras. Some of it's the dialogue, which I felt to be a little stilted and kind of unnatural at times for what's supposed to be, these, coming of age film where these friends who have known each other for a long time or hanging out, and it should feel very, kind of natural. It's a little hard for me to tell if it's the dialogue itself, if it's the performances, or if it's both. I remember somewhat of a quality of this with Buried on Shine Mountain, but I think I was able to get past it on that film a little bit better. I think sometimes if you're making a genre film, whether it's, action, whether it's horror, or in this case, a Western, I think there's something about that stilted dialogue that has like a bit of a charming quality. and at least it's characters that you're more detached from, so you can kind of look past it easier, where this is more of a non-genre, like drama comedy. And so I think kind of feeling in the world with the characters is really important, and the dialogue did take me out of it a little bit. All that said, I don't like to spend a ton of time in reviews of relatively lower budget films making criticisms that where it does come down to the budget itself. But I do think that there is at least one way where this movie could be improved upon a little bit without adding anything to the budget. And that is, I think it is a little bit over edited. There's some dialogue scenes, again, that are relatively simple, like around the campfire kind of conversations, where there's a ton of cuts. There's almost a cut like every time somebody a new character is speaking, and especially I think with these kind of intimate conversation type scenes, it makes sense to me, I think, to sort of cut the editing back just a little bit, kind of linger on certain shots, and really just kind of allow the actors to act, allow the moment to sort of breathe a little bit more. So overall, like I said, I didn't love this film, but I certainly didn't hate it either. I do think that the characters are really insightful, and I think there's enough visual flair to a lot of the filmmaking that I'm definitely interested to see what Nigel and Stewart end up doing next. So I'm gonna give this film a high 2 stars. It's probably like a perfect 2.5. I don't really do half stars anymore. I kind of debated giving the film a 3 like I did with Buried on Shine Mountain. But ultimately, I do think I liked that film a little bit more with kind of the genre trappings, and I was able to look past some of those production issues a little bit easier than I could with this film. Anyway, that's my review. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked this, you can like the video down below and subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll also post the links to Nigel and Stewart's website, where you can get a copy either of DVD or Blu-ray if that's your thing, or if you want to rent the movie as well. Showing them support would be fantastic. But that's all for today, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.